Secularization is an interesting question. I was actually talking to people about this the other day. In the 1960s and 70s, the general view of many scholars was that within a generation or two, you wouldn't see much in the way of formal institutional religions operative, at least in the so-called developed West. Everyone was on a kind of trajectory to Holland, in some sense. That was the idea. It seems to be the case that by about the 1990s, the foremost theorists of this view, most famously Peter Berger, actually said, we were just completely wrong. In fact, secularization is not happening, either at the personal level of individual belief or at the institutional level of church and other religious organizations' presence in the public world. I think that that's still the case. The most interesting fact I have come across lately is that, it was in either the Pew Forum's World Religions Report or a similar report done by, I believe, the Lilly Foundation, is that actually the world's population in 2050 will be more religious than the world's population in 2000. And the reasons for this are complicated, but they have a lot to do with demographics, that it seems to be the case that as people lose their religiosity, they don't have quite as many babies. And so you reproduce at a lower rate, and that's going to change the population of the world, its demographic structure. That's an interesting thought, and I don't know if that's a temporary thing or if it's a longer-term thing. But I like to point out to my more resolutely secularist colleagues, of whom I have a few, that the world that we live in now is probably the most secular world that they will live in for the rest of their lives. And that might mean that instead of just holding your breath and hoping for these religious people and religious organizations to go away, you might actually want to take a breath and try to talk to some people and figure out what that is. I think the interesting fact that secularization was trying to get at, and I had a conversation with Peter Berger that made me think he thought this too, was not so much the decline of religion or religious belief as much as the pluralization of it, that we are in a world where now in my classes, I will have Muslims, Hindus, 18 different kinds of secularists, 14 different kinds of post-Christians, Protestant evangelical Christians of a Calvinist variety, Lutherans, Episcopalians, Roman Catholics, Baptists, American Baptists, Southern Baptists, multiple varieties of Jewish students. And the kind of diversity that we have, even in our student body at UVA, is, I think, the future. And that's a simultaneously complicated future, but also one that I think of as incredibly exhilarating, because the possibility of having actual people of deep faith of these traditions and of non-religious traditions able to learn to talk to each other, that's a kind of capacity that I don't think our species has had since at least the Tower of Babel. And that's an exciting, for me, exhilarating thought.